that the house where the Hispanics were living?
Yeah, they're from,
Ecuador.
I heard they're Burmese.
I know, that's not Hispanic.
That one house exploded. So, you know, Pat, I got a call. I appreciate it.
We're
We
almost
have to
through.
meet. Let me go get something at the office. I forgot to bring my pad.
You know, Pat, I was going wrong last week.
You did? How'd that go?
It went good. It was working earlier. And I told Connor, wait. Oh, that's when we made the story.
Oh, that's good. My boys lost again, too. 9-7. I know. They tied it up at the end.
Syracuse Mets, they crushed Buffalo last night. They won in Buffalo. Way they're going, they have not lost a series at all this year. Syracuse Mets. They went 4 or 5 out of 6. They're so dominant. And they better be in the postseason.
I'm waiting for Councilor Paniagua, but,
Pitching is good, but sometimes it's like
yeah,
with the Syracuse Mets, they get themselves in a hole. It's like Talia Eckhart comes in Friday, base load one, I loads the bases on walks.
okay, folks, I'm going to start this. This is our local waterfront revitalization program. We have our own Carney here, and this is the meeting of the Economic Development Committee of the Common Council. I'm joined by Councilor Paniagua and Councilor Nave, and I'm going to hand it immediately over to Owen Carney, who's been working on this for, 2 decades anyways, right?
Couple of years, Counselor. Appreciate the introduction, Counselor Hogan, and your support. Owen Kearney, Deputy Commissioner for Planning and Sustainability. And I've prepared a few slides today. We're want to give you an overview of the program, but also talk a little bit about the goals, and ultimately what the purpose of all of this. Why are we doing this? So with that, we'll get right into it. So the local waterfront revitalization program, it's a New York State funded program. The city was awarded a grant, and we're using that to do just as it says, establish a vision for the waterfront area in our community. And we're doing that collectively with the public, with other city departments, with other partner agencies like the county and New York State, and property owners and business owners in that area. So that is the area. You see it really ranges from along 690, sort of follows the 690 border along the southern, southwestern side, cuts across to 81, 81 north to Hiawatha, out Hiawatha really to just about the city line, and then kind of jogs back over and includes all of, maybe most importantly, the city's lakefront area, the lakefront which is in the city, and also the entire inner harbor. So that's the area we're focused on. So the framework, what is an LWRP? I'm not going to go through each one of these, but simply put, it establishes that vision for the area. It also, one of the things that's being drafted as part of the plan is an implementation strategy. How do you implement the vision? How do we accomplish and improve this lakefront area? We identify short and long-term projects, which I'll talk about and provide those examples a little bit later in the slides. And another important aspect is it also identifies financing sources, which is real important to get projects done. And many of those financing partnerships are through New York State. So the goals and objectives. This is, for those of you that are interested and want to kind of dive into this a little bit more, I realize that slide, even on this big television, is a little bit hard to see, but it establishes the vision, that top center paragraph, and then the goals under there, and talks about All of this material, I should mention, is available on the project website. Counselor, I can't read it either from over here. But all of these, the entire plan, including this page from the plan, is available on the project website, on our planning and sustainability. The document, the plan itself is a couple hundred pages, but much of that is appendices, a lot of data, a lot of public input materials at the end. But really, that first 100 pages or so summarizes not only the vision, the goals and objectives, but also the projects, which, again, I'll talk about here shortly. The next slide really summarizes those goals a little bit easier, a little more concisely. Safe connections, safety and connections in and around the Inner Harbor, connections to Franklin Square, the north side, the regional market and ballpark, and the city's south and west side. So those connections are a critical part of this and one of the primary goals. Year-round recreation, year-round use of the waterfront is important. These goals, again, have largely been informed by our public engagement process, and recreation was really a top 4 item that we heard about. Economic development and tourism. This is a huge opportunity, this area in general, with the ballpark, the regional market, the Destiny USA, the aquarium that the county is investing in. There's a lot of big institutions and anchor institutions as it relates to visitors and tourism, and we surely want to not only complement those existing ones, but how do we continue to draw visitors and investment into this area? And then finally, the bottom right there, sustainability, environmental concerns relative to water quality, relative to habitat. That is an important part of the program, and a part that New York State, the project funder, really prioritized and was also prioritized during our public engagement. So the structure, the plan itself has these 7 sections. I'm going to talk about most of them in a little bit throughout the presentation, but this, again, is required by New York State. The structure is dictated by them. The first 2, we talked about the boundary earlier. We saw the map. A lot of inventory and analysis. That's research about land use, property ownership, soils, environmental quality, historic preservation, zoning, land use, whole range of things go into that research. The policies are a big part of the program. That's Section 3. Section 4, we'll spend probably most of the time on that. Those are some projects that we've identified. And then the last couple sections I'll summarize at the end of the presentation. So community engagement, this is something that we did really in the bulk of this in 2022, a little bit last year. But we hosted, as it notes there, 3 public meetings that were very well attended. One of them at the Freight House, where we probably had over 100 people there. A couple of pop-up meetings, both at the regional market and along the Creek Walk, and then an online survey with, I think, over close to 300 individual responses to the survey. And all of those survey responses and public engagement materials are included in the plan appendices. But the bulleted items below talk about, let's say the top 8 to 10 items that we heard from folks. I won't go through each one of them, but not surprisingly, a lot of this I think we can broadly characterize as placemaking. How do we make the Inner Harbor and the lakefront area into a place people want to visit? And places that we visit whether they're in our neighborhoods or places like Franklin Square or Armory Square or downtown or our neighborhood business corridors, they have characteristics. They have things that people want to see, connections to these places, and different amenities. And the Inner Harbor and the lakefront area could use more of that. It's really underutilized. So not surprisingly, many of the things we heard were things that would complement placemaking. Exactly. Baltimore waterfront is a frequent example. There's places to eat, there's places to walk, there's pedestrian and bike amenities, shopping, wayfinding sign, all the above, and you can go as a visitor, and it's a real cohesive destination. During that survey, one of the things that we heard about, and this is focused on Progress Park. We said, what are, you see in the top right, Progress Park in the southwest corner of the Inner Harbor, the city-owned park. What are amenities people would like to see there? Two of the top ones, both circled there, the picnic pavilion, sort of a covered pavilion, seating area is one, and the other one is, not surprisingly, a seating opportunity. We have this great space overlooking the Inner Harbor, adjacent to the amphitheater, but there's limited places to sit or gather, picnic, have an event, get together with friends. So these are the type of amenities that we heard a real priority. And that's, again, those were the things that we heard, over 200 responses. Some of the other ones, docking and educational, outdoor classroom was another big one. So,
I don't know, maybe people aren't aware of, as far as the public property that we preserved along the lake,
correct,
as opposed to the private property. You're talking about, I know we've had great relationships with the people who have businesses in that area and all that, and we've worked with them, but also it was obviously that property that we had, the public property is really important.
That's exactly right.
And the idea was, the city's idea has always been to keep access, public access to that around the lake.
That's exactly right, Councilor. Public access to our waterfront is a top 3 priority as part of this plan. It's documented in this plan. And one of the elements, and I'll go into this in a little more detail, is at that corner of Van Rensselaer and Kirkpatrick Street, there's a city-owned park space. There's the parking lot, sort of the grassy area. It leads right to the amphitheater. That, along with much of the waterfront, the piers on the east side of the harbor, much of that is municipally owned, city-owned, and we will continue to maintain access to that. But one of the things we're doing with this plan is, how do we enhance these areas to draw more people down to these places, to use these places?
And I don't think folks might not realize, but that was originally all state land. And,
that is correct.
It took forever. I was actually under Mayor Driscoll that we ended up with that land.
Right.
Because the state tried to actually RFP it twice and it didn't work out. And only when it came under the city province that we were able to RFP the other part of it, the private part of it. So.
Correct, and the piers are something that the city now has ownership of, and so
got from the
thinking,
Canal Corporation,
right,
correct.
and thinking creatively about the reuse of those. And again, those are one of those projects we identify
So
as
on,
in
we
the
have a
plan.
lot of this property, a lot of it is owned by core development. Think about a lot of that property.
Yeah,
So, do
that-
you think we can go into working negotiations if we need a new hotel, new sports arena?
That was as a result of an RFP. There was 3 outfits that looked for that. As part of the RFP, it was decided by the council, as a matter of fact, the Councilor Nave, that we picked Core to develop that area.
Yeah, that's right. That they've the southwestern side of the Inner Harbor. They have the existing buildings. I know they are working on plans for additional development and investment there. So they're a partner. Much of the work that we're focused on as part of this plan is the public space, the public green space, the trails, the right of way. What are things that the city and our partners at Onondaga County, at New York State, what are things that the public owned facilities, what can we enhance to complement many of these private property owners and businesses in and around the Inner Harbor? So we're really focused as part of this plan on the public aspects of the public ownership out there. Continuing on the survey, just one additional, this slide is on the, as it notes there, on the Inner Harbor East, kind of the other side of the Inner Harbor where the piers and the existing Solar Street side. Some of the things that we heard about are lighting, public art, benches. It really gets back to that idea of placemaking. How do we draw people to this area and provide those amenities where it's comfortable to spend some time here? Outdoor seating, outdoor dining is another big part of that. Anybody that's been to waterfronts throughout the country, you know, you don't necessarily have to be an urban planner to realize, what are the things that are drawing me here? Things to do, things to look at, places to go, ease of access around it, safety, a whole wayfinding, being able to find your way around a place perhaps you've never been before. All of these things are part of the vision for the lakefront area. So a couple of the projects, I thought it'd be a good idea to, talk through some of the projects that we identified. We can group them into these three groups that you see there. We identified about 15 projects. They really are, starting in the top left there, trail enhancement, broadly speaking, trails, sidewalks, access, programming opportunities, and then the public space projects that I talked about. And I'm going to talk through about 3 or 4 of these in more detail over the next few slides. So this map, which nobody in the room can read, is all of the projects, all 15 of those projects are on this map. This is right in the front of the plan, so if folks that want to take a look, if you need a hard copy, let me know, but it is accessible on the project website. All of the projects are laid out on this slide, which is why it's a lot, but it also, I think, begins to say, this is a focused area with a range of different projects throughout that will help revitalize and improve this area. So one of them, one of the projects that we'll talk through is that area, the bridge in the top left that you see there is Hiawatha. The area under it is an area adjacent to the creek walk, just adjacent to Destiny USA. This is, we heard this is a popular access area to the creek walk out to Onondaga Lake. This is a popular fishing area, and it's part of the city's creek walk trail. But it's also an area that, as you can see from the picture below, there's very few amenities. There's no parking area, no benches, no lighting, no wayfinding. We know people are using this, but unless you're kind of in the know or comfortable in this area, you probably wouldn't drop in and visit. So what are ideas to improve this area? Just a few things. Formalizing the parking area, providing seating, bike amenities, clearing, in the distance there, you see better access, better view along Onondaga Creek there with the tree plantings, seating areas, and some landscaping. Simple, these aren't radical ideas, but they're ways that communities and municipalities are improving their trails and improving these popular spaces. And that obviously lighting at night, this is just kind of a night view, making this safe and accessible. It's a place that we heard from folks they want, that they're already there, and how do we enhance these places? These are some just concepts about how we do that. The next one, we know that the county continues to invest in the Loop the Lake trail. That southeastern area is I don't know the exact status, but I know the design and the future implementation of that is a priority of the counties. And so how do we connect to this great resource, this great asset around Onondaga Lake? Park Street is a big part of that connection, and it's a very there is really no connection now. How do we enhance that connection? And on the next slide, it talks a little bit about that Park Street corridor. Just some simple ways that we can improve pedestrian access, street signage, pedestrian safety amenities, simple things to connect city residents in this area, particularly Northside residents, to this great recreational resource in the Loop the Lake Trail. Next slide is Inner Harbor. And we talked a little bit about that. That's both along Inner Harbor Park, Progress Park, that top left corner is looking to the southwest. We see the parking area, the amphitheater is at the bottom of the top photo, and then the bottom photo identifies the piers. The Inner Harbor is an area we know considerable investment. The existing hotel, core, the property owners we just mentioned continues to invest in this area.
In fact, they have, I think they got an application in HCR about another building, and I know they got plans for 2 other buildings too. One would be a senior citizen buildings.
So continue to draw residents out there and then provide those additional mixed-use amenities, retail, service, things like that. We recently updated our zoning to accommodate that. But we also know on the, if you, this is a, on the west side, or excuse me, on the east side along Solar Street, Onondaga County's investment in the aquarium. So between some of these larger property owners, whether they're private, whether they're our partners at Onondaga County, the Inner Harbor is going to continue to evolve and change and see investment. And so what can we do, the city, with these publicly owned spaces in Progress Park, which we just mentioned, but also the piers with the city. Councilor Hogan, as you just mentioned, the city has recently acquired. What are ways that we can invest in these areas to really complement all of that private investment and development around?
And I think there's a realization, especially among the county too. I mean, obviously the Rough Steel site, which was a disaster if it had got into somebody else's hands, but OSIDA was able to negotiate and get that raw steel site. They spent $2 million to clean it up. Right. I mean, I think we've been very lucky as far as in regards to this, because I think through different administrations, there's been an ebb and flow as far as how much effort we put into this area. And under this administration, there's been a lot of effort too.
Yeah,
so.
the mayor has been very supportive of the plan and has, you know, I think activating this space is a huge opportunity. I mean, maybe that's really, I think, maybe the purpose of this and the next couple slides is the opportunity.
I'd really like to see this extend, because you look in the back of the stadium, and we've got all that wasteland that's never been touched, and a previous county executive would say, yeah, we want to enhance it, and it's never been done. If you look at this area, then you go towards Hiawatha Boulevard, go into the town of Salina, you see all this wasteland. I call it wasteland, and that was known as the Netty lot. We can invest in this area, so when people are watching the ball games, when a home run, and they just see these weeds. There's other stadiums now, when they renovated the one in Scranton, you see a grassy knoll where kids are out in center field. That's my envision. I was hoping when they redid the stadium, they could still do it though. And another point, I hope by this project, we need to enhance the transportation center. It's getting too big now, and it's getting outdated. It's too small. We need to, with that space we have as well.
And I agree, Councilor, and we'll talk about some of the streetscape and right-of-way improvements, the street improvements shortly. The next slide just sort of transitions some of the concepts. How do we make those piers multi-use? How do we create event space? Making sure they maintain public access along these areas. But anybody that's been out there recently, they're just large grassy areas, beautiful view of the water, beautiful view of the lake and much of the rest of the city, including downtown. How do we activate these spaces? So this plan begins to, it clearly identifies that this is a priority, and it starts to develop some concepts about how we do that, which ultimately become eligible for state funding. And I'll talk about that at the end. So shifting to the, if you go back, so the southwest corner, we're looking at Kirkpatrick Street along the bottom of the screen, and then Van Rensselaer to the northwest there. Again, a concept for that area. We know the Parks Department, matter of fact, I think it's on the agenda today, has some items relative to the inclusive playground, the concession area. That's moving forward on that right side of the park space. The left side is again that it's large open space, but it's an area that we have, and I'll talk about this shortly. We have funding to reimagine that space and really enhance that space with state funding.
What's the orange line on the top?
So that one of the concepts, and if you go to the next slide, is so looking at the amphitheater, which in the top left is represented by that green roof. Again, this is just a concept. That's the existing amphitheater area, but could we create a connection along the water? And what you see, the top right photo shows some tiered seating along the waterfront. The bottom left shows perhaps some type of boardwalk in the water, getting people out onto the water. The bottom right shows perhaps a reimagined amphitheater, which we know the Parks Department is looking at the amphitheater. How do we stabilize and improve that area? Again, concepts focusing on city-owned, municipally owned property that really could be a catalyst for some real creative placemaking and complement many of the things going on
And
out
Core's already done a good job activating that area. They have festivals out there, and it's been, I mean, obviously last weekend.
Yep.
And then during last
Yeah,
fall, you know, the boat races and things like that. A lot of really clever things that they're doing out there to activate that space. So, I mean, this is all right in the vision.
That's exactly right, Counselor. Next slide is talking about some of those streetscape enhancements, which, Counselor, you just mentioned. Both, if you look at the map on the right, you see Hiawatha, the longer lines are Hiawatha, the shorter ones are Bear Street. Another part, New York State Department of Transportation, I think is holding contract 3 is under development. They're holding a public meeting tomorrow night talking about the improvements in this area. We know North Clinton Street, all of those exits, the bridges, Court and Bear and Spencer are all being rebuilt. North Clinton Street's being redesigned. This area is seeing immense investment along that northeastern edge of the project area. What are some streetscape enhancements that we could make? And Hiawatha is a great example. I know our partners in the engineering department have done some improvements along Hiawatha, but you know, thinking about it more holistically, that whole corridor, and I think the next slide begins to provide, again, just some examples, and this would be that access into, this is at Carbon Street in Hiawatha. What you see in this photo, additional lighting, enhanced crosswalks, smaller, more pedestrian-friendly intersections, bike lanes, street trees. There's a whole host of elements captured in this concept, which is just that, it's a concept, but it begins to describe and illustrate the possibilities along a corridor like Hiawatha, which I think we've all been up and down many times and said, wow, this is a corridor that's a little lacking. It could use a variety of streetscape enhancements. This plan identifies that as a priority. Again, this just kind of another view there. Some of the minor streetscape enhancements, really more focused on some of those shorter north-south connections, particularly across Hiawatha on the top right there, but also along streets like Van Rensselaer, Solar Street, North Clinton Street. What are improvements that we can make to really make these better for pedestrians, better for bikes, particularly if we're going to activate this area for visitors. There's going to be a lot more people on foot, on bike, on micro-mobility, scooters, things like that. We need to make those enhancements, and this plan, again, identifies
Might have to bring
that.
back trolleys, too, to get people around. That's a good suggestion.
Getting people looped around the inner harbor.
Yes.
Well,
around the
and
area.
part of that is the trail connections. I mean, the creek walk goes up the west side of the inner harbor, but there's no way to really connect to the other side.
Yeah.
I mean, there is on foot through sidewalks and stuff, but how do we think creatively about our trail network? Again, an example along Solar Street, wider sidewalks. I think one of the big takeaways, and you see the aquarium there kind of in the distance on the top left, but how do things like street trees and wider sidewalks complement, on the right side of the screen, investment? That is a vacant lot right now, and I think what you see right on the right side of the screen is people investing, private property owners, businesses investing in this area. And I think setting the table with these kind of streetscape enhancements is a good start to that.
You know, I think we got to be aware also with the aquarium and also the extra housing that I know Core is planning will bring a lot of people into the area, and with Micron coming in, I think we got to somehow come up with a parking strategy there that might include, we don't want big parking lots. We might include obviously a parking garage over there. If you got like estimates of people are going to be at the aquarium and people are going to be living down there, I think we're probably, it's going to be an attraction. And I noticed that during the Core events, there's people parked all over the place. place, you know, and last weekend too, you know, so we're going to have to come up with some solution to the parking issue there too.
Agreed, and one of the additional, additional projects is taking a look cohesively at some type of parking study to make some recommendations. That is something we identify and would be eligible for state funding, something to note, Counselor. Next slide, and I'll go through the next couple ones relatively quickly. As this area develops, this is developing a brand. And I think we all refer to it as the Inner Harbor. Most people in the community, if you say Inner Harbor, know it. But here's an example from Buffalo Canal side. Really, the brand is taken off. Events use this, and it's, again, one of those things as we continue to invest in this area to develop a brand would be something that's a best practice as far as waterfront development. The next item is a tourism campaign or strategy. If we're having visitors into the area, particularly from outside the city, even outside New York State, developing materials that help folks get around, whether that's parking, whether that's places to eat, places to stay. This is another recommendation as waterfront are developed.
Owen, has there been any discussion about moving some of our festivals maybe down the road someday to the Inner Harbor for there to be more open space than what we have at Clinton Square?
A great idea, Counselor.
Okay.
It's an area that provides, Clinton Square is a destination. A lot of great festivals are held there, and I'm sure will continue to be. But this is another option. I think that's part of it. This is not, our intent here is downtown is a great attraction and destination. This is going to complement. This is going to give folks another.
That's why I mentioned, like, people reside downtown where they live, hotels, where you might want to go to an attraction to have trolleys back.
Right.
To bring them there.
Back and forth.
Yeah.
I think with passive recreation, you don't have enough of that in some, you have it in some of the major city parks, but here, with people, what it's going to make this place attractive is it's going to be very walkable and accessible.
That's right.
And that's what we want to like sort of focus on, I think, so.
Agreed.
You know.
One thing that in seeing this project, it reminds me of home, Puerto Rico. In the San Juan Harbor, there's something very similar, and they have this whole space created for artisans and things, local things made in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
And it creates great local tourism. At the same time, it brings a lot of tourism from wherever it is they're coming.
Right.
And they're not there every day of the week, but the weekends usually they probably would be there, and they create special events around just that, so that they can bring the people in.
Local artisans, space for
and
them
it is
to.
economic development for the arts as well.
Yeah,
So it may be something you want to think about.
will do. I think that's a great idea. And in continuing is the signage and wayfinding. How do we get people in and around the Inner Harbor, particularly not only the Inner Harbor, but let's not forget the regional market, the ballpark, the regional transportation center. If people are coming in there, how do they safely get from that transportation center to the ballpark or the future aquarium or to the Inner Harbor? Wayfinding, signage, these are pretty common sense things that we will need to do as part of the future development of this area.
I think we also got to realize, I mean, the creek walk, I mean, I don't know how many people have walked from downtown to the end of the creek walk, the city part of it, but I have. And I think that there's some isolated areas in there, and we all know that. But I made the suggestion, I think, 3 different administrations, but we have to have like some sort of in Dallas, they have a old railroad track they turned into a trail right through the middle of Dallas. And they have like a park, not a park patrol, but more like a welcoming guardian type. You know, somebody on bicycles going back and forth, and especially during the summertime, the early fall. You know, I know the Parks Department has seasonal employees. It'd be nice if we had put somebody on a bike with a cell phone just in case. Maybe even also as like a way to address any kind of trash or litter. But also make people more comfortable that they see somebody with a City of Syracuse shirt on, you know.
Yeah, and that could be part of that future strategy as more people use it. And I know that the city has dedicated additional resources to trail maintenance and oversight, both the Empire State, the Creek Walk, many of our trails. I think as people continue to use this, that's,
Being an old
again,
parks guy, the more
yeah.
people that use a place, the
Yeah,
safer it becomes.
safer it becomes. That's exactly right. But I'll take a look at that Dallas idea. Last project example, and this is one that we work with closely on our partners at Onondaga County. This is the southwest shore of the lake. It is in the city. It's county-owned. It's largely just a green space. It's publicly accessible. But how do we create, and the next slide begins to walk through, one of the things in working with the county planning department and the county administration, very clearly, I don't think they want to radically change this area, but how do we develop trails and seating and amenities that would just enhance the public use of this place, complement the existing Loop to the Lake Trail, but also provide this great public resource along the shores of Onondaga Lake. And one of the and again, an example in this, you see connections, enhance the water's stabilizing the water's edge, something like a pier for fishing or photos. We know people like to be out on the water. We know people like bird watching, and it's just it's a comfortable place to be much of the year. It's a beautiful place to be year round. And what are enhancements that the county could potentially make? Again, these are ideas that we work with as we develop this plan with them.
Well, we could go in the boat business, we can boat rides around Hot Dog Lake, you want to fish here?
Sailing would be better.
Not a bad idea, Counselor. The planning thing falls through.
We're leaving Gettys for Salina, you're lying there.
Well, and just, with the amphitheater continuing to have a full schedule, the county amphitheater with, it's just there's more and more investment, there's more and more people out here using this, visitors. So how do we, what are things that we can do in the city, and particularly in the Inner Harbor and along the lakefront, to complement and energize some of those visitors and that investment in that area?
And it pays for itself after a long run.
For somebody who started his career at the City Parks Department back in the late 1960s, among 800 acres of polluted land, which was Oil City, it's amazing how far this area has become. With the advent of Carousel Mall and Destiny, and then that sort of energized everybody to look at this other property. And we've come a long ways. We've been lucky, and I think we just got to keep the focus on creating basically what's a new neighborhood. Not too many cities get to create a whole new neighborhood, and we've done that so far, and we can keep on progressing. This is, I think, Micron coming in, the demographics of the people that are coming to work here, 75% of them are going to be looking for apartments, and I think there's at least 5 different neighborhoods that are going to really benefit from that, and this is one of them right here.
Well, and there's a significant amount of vacant land out there.
Sure.
We've recently updated the zoning to accommodate a denser development out here.
Okay.
We have a housing strategy that identifies a range of housing types to really benefit many people in this community. And we have affordable housing regulations as part of that zoning. So really, a lot of this starting to come together, the regulatory, not only the vision, but the regulatory piece of it also.
This is MX4 or 3?
Well, the lakefront is a range from commercial, mixed use, but much of it accommodates residential development.
It's a balanced approach over there. So.
But it also allows those complementary uses, services, retail, restaurant, things like that we know people that are potentially living out here would want to access in their neighborhood. So moving forward, the next couple sections are Section 3 are policies, local implementation, funding sources, and consultation with our state and federal partners. How do we do this? All those photos look great, and I think most of the folks in the room, great. If you can do half this, you'll be ahead of the game. How do we affect that? How do we put those things? How do we implement those things? Some of those concepts that we saw. This is, and I'll move through these couple sections relatively quickly, but the policies develop enforceable statements that prioritize the policy categories on the right-hand side: development, protection of fish and wildlife, acknowledging flooding and erosion concerns, public access. I'm not going to go through all of them, But the state, as the bottom left bullet identifies, the state has 44 policies that really represent a balance of really maintaining this as a unique place, but also facilitating economic development. A policy example, here's one of those 44 policies in bold. State agencies will avoid undertaking, funding, or approving non-water dependent uses when such uses would preempt the reasonable development of water-dependent uses. Let's prioritize water-dependent uses along the waterfront, not backing up industrial uses, commercial uses, things like that. Maintain an open and accessible waterfront is kind of perhaps the short version here. And I think also important is that New York State is a partner in this as they invest in this area, whether that's the Department of Environmental Conservation, the Department of Transportation, the Department of State who is funding this, that they will continue to recognize and maintain our local policies. Techniques for local implementation, this really just kind of summarizes all of the different local regulations in one place. I realize that that right-hand side of the screen is hard to identify, but things like zoning, building code, our stormwater codes, all of those things, flooding regulations, all in one place, so it's easier for people to identify what are the regulations you need to meet in this waterfront area. The next slide, consistency. Part of this program is the consistency review law, and that part of what the city will do is determine that proposed actions and investments in this area are consistent with the policy standards. That is how we implement this plan, to ensure, along with all of our building regulations, zoning, that really investment in this area is consistent with this plan. That's an important part of this. This just talks very briefly about, state agency actions must be consistent with the plan to the maximum extent practicable. I offered that as just, again, the state, reinforcing the state's support of this, and state funding sources, Section 6, just a couple more slides here. One of the things, if you go back, a whole host of funding sources for the program. I circled one in right, the consolidated funding application will be back. I'll be back before you, as will many of my colleagues here shortly, with our applications, seeking authorization to apply for the consolidated funding applications, which is a great source of funding for implementation projects. And a good example of that is Progress Park. We just, we issued the request for proposals for the redesign of Progress Park. As we mentioned, the Parks Department is doing their accessible playground and concession area. And on the other side of the park, really the green space and the parking area, we have state funding, both design funding and construction funding, to reimagine this area. Continue to have public access, continue to prioritize this as a passive recreational area for residents and visitors. But based on those goals we saw earlier, things like pedestrian amenities, pavilions, trail connections, safety, lighting, public art will be part of this process. Some of your colleagues, both Councilor Caldwell and Councilor Hudson, were on that RFP committee. We intend to award that contract. Matter of fact, I need to draft a letter to get to all of you later today, but that'll be on your agenda here shortly, and we'll begin the redesign of that. And I think maybe the most important takeaway from this is it's consistent with the plan, and both those design and construction dollars, which exceed $1 million, have been funded as part of the local waterfront revitalization program. That's another reason we're doing this. Those state funds, we become eligible as we advance this plan.
And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the advocacy of Councilor Manto for the Progress Park too. So,
Absolutely, and he will look forward to working with him on the redesign of this. And frankly, public engagement is a big part of that, and our stakeholder group, folks that are using this for events, for recreation. We want to hear from them about, hey, what are things that we could do to improve this? We just had a huge Pride event there last weekend, people out in this space. What are the things that worked well? What are things that we could potentially improve as part of this design? So we'll be working with folks to do
I
that.
think we also want to take the opportunity maybe to incorporate some of the old parks buildings involved there, the old White Oaks Park. I mean, especially for facility use, maybe by some pedestrians that might.
Right. And as you
people
point out, the
using
Parks
park.
Department is right across
Yeah.
Kirkpatrick Street. And then last slide here, next steps. So this summer, as the first bullet, we're holding this committee meeting. You've got an agenda, an item on your agenda to essentially affirm that you and your colleagues have reviewed and generally support the plan. You're not
All
adopting.
500 pages.
All 500, thank you, Counselor. I appreciate your diligence.
It's lucky, quick reader.
Yes. You're just affirming your support of this. This isn't an adoption of the plan today or at the study session. It's just simply saying, look, we're supportive of this plan. And I appreciate the time at this committee meeting to hopefully gain your support. New York State Department of State, the funder, continues to review. As I note, this summer we'll begin the redesign of Progress Park, which we just talked about this fall. We'll make any revisions that New York State has and perhaps any input over the next couple of weeks we receive from you. We'll finalize that plan. And then ultimately, towards the end of the year, it'll go back to state where they do a comprehensive review. Their legal and other agencies. It's a multi-agency state review. They kind of finalize it, and then we'll come back to you for final adoption. So I should note that much of the remainder of this, other than perhaps this committee meeting, the item on your agenda, is really working with our partners at New York State. We're going to be working on their schedule, and we're excited not only for their support, but helping us work towards the finish line on this.
Well, I want to acknowledge to former Mayor Tom Young. It's almost 40 years ago. He saw this vision that, it was a rundown area. And he saw vision. And he mentioned Baltimore then. So, he started to help to get rid of the oil tanks. All this investment. Hey, at night we're going up. We call it going down to the Barge Canal, where the north side is and west side is.
Leave me out of there.
He's outing you.
Well, Councilor, your point's a good one. It's a long time coming. There's been a lot of people involved in this area, and a lot of people continue to be involved in it. And I think what we're doing here is starting to formalize a plan for this as we really see this area start to take off.
So we adopt let's say that everything goes well, and we adopt this in December, by December, winter. So this is a lot, so I'm sure this will be put out in phases. And then, but what's the timeline that you're envisioning?
So maybe broadly speaking, the idea is that we adopt this plan and that investment within the waterfront revitalization area must be consistent with that plan, so that is a big part of just the plan adoption is a good start. It also allows us to the city, to continue to seek funding for all of those implementation projects that we talked about. So the streetscape enhancements, the branding, the wayfinding, the parks improvements to the piers, all of those things are now eligible for state funding. And as I mentioned, Progress Park is the first one that we sought funding for. The city was awarded over $1 million for that. So much to the state's credit, they are supporting the development of this plan financially, but they're also putting their money where their mouth is. And as we identify things that say the community feels that this could be a catalytic project, New York State's helping us fund it. So I think a lot of credit goes to our partners at the Department of State. And so it's really two things. One, future development consistent with the plan, creating a vision for this area, but also continuing to become eligible for state and federal funds for implementation
So the funding will be
projects.
put together in 2025 if.
Well, and even this
starting-
July is part of a potential consolidated funding application.
Oh, okay, so you're
so
applying now.
even with the plan not being, the draft is at 99% complete, but the review continues. Even without a complete adopted plan, we are seeking state funding to begin to implement the plan.
You're already doing that.
Already started. So we already started is maybe the short answer to your question, Counselor.
Okay.
For their LWRP, I don't know offhand. They've had multiple projects out there, and so their waterfront is really quite a success story, the canal side area. So I don't know how much they've invested there, but I imagine it's considerable. And it provides an example of kind of where the city could potentially be in, 5, 6, 7 years.
So you said most of the funding would come from New York State. And is there other sources of funding you're looking at besides that?
That slide, that maybe 2 slides back, or the funding source, sorry, our clicker's a little slow here. This identifies a whole host of funding sources. Many of them are the Environmental Protection Fund, Water Quality Improvement Program, many of the EFC, the Environmental Facilities Corporation, many of these are state dollars. It's a state program. The Canal Corporation, our partners at NYSERDA, the Department of Environmental Conservation, a whole host of state funding. The majority of the funding that we would be seeking would largely be from the state. But I think it's also important to note that the state and federal government are investing, that 81 corridor, North Clinton Street, all of those bridges. That's part, as you guys are well aware of, a $2 billion federal investment along the edge of this project area. So, coupled with all the private investment that we're seeing, and the county investment that we talked about, not only the aquarium, but potential improvements to sites like Ross Steel or the southwestern shore of the lake. So it's a team effort. It's the state and feds. It's our partners at the county, and it's also work that we continue to do in the project area, engineering, public works, whole host of projects in this area.
Traditionally, public investment precipitates private investment. You see it all over. When I go down to Washington, D.C., the Navy Yard used to be sort of an area just like this area.
Yep.
That bad.
Yeah,
And now,
setting the table for...
Yeah, now Anacostia River, the Creek Walk, and businesses and all that. So it's really, I got to congratulate you on your persistence in this.
Well, appreciate it, and it's a lot of folks.
Really, and you got a great team that helps.
A lot of colleagues and our consultant team, our partners at New York State, and partners in neighborhood and business development that have continued to push this forward, and the mayor's office. As you can imagine, this is something the mayor and the deputy mayor have been supportive of all along. So.
Well, when you mentioned at the beginning a project website, do we find that through the city website?
City website, and if you go to this city planning and sustainability website, there is again Sarah Palo has helped us build out this site, and all the materials are right there. And the one of the things we can do is put this presentation up there, but the full document.
You could send it to us too.
We could. I will make a note of that. The presentation to you all, but the document's there. So if you want to look at all of those individual projects, if you want to look at the policies, all of the public engagement, all of the survey feedback is in there. It could keep you busy for a while if you want to read it all. But if there's some specific things you want to find, let me know. Happy to guide.
500-page documents, sort of nice evening light reading.
Well, right. I thought you'd like that, Counselor. But appreciate your time, and unless there's other questions, appreciate your continued support.
Appreciate your efforts here, Owen. It's been great. So if there's no other questions, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Sure.
Okay, second.
Second.
We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another meeting, right?
Yeah, I got it.
Yes.